The emotional impact is very large. It will certainly mobilize Trump supporters. It may make some folks who are less committed think again about this race. But does it change who's more able to handle the economy, or whose position on abortion do I favor?
Dr. Franklin, we're recording. Can I ask you first, and I'm interested in your gut instinct at least as much as in your scientific analysis. So on the question of the assassination attempt yesterday, do you feel that what happened yesterday is going to turn out to be an election game changer?
Yeah, I'm skeptical of the game changer. I think a lot of the things about this election were already set in place. What are the big issues? How did they see the candidates? The assassination attempt is a terrible event and tragic in that we have deaths and serious injuries, as well as President Trump escaping so narrowly. But when we've seen assassination attempts in the past against Gerald Ford, twice when he was president, against Ronald Reagan, those had important short-term movements of people feeling great sympathy for Ford or Reagan. But they didn't fundamentally reshape their administrations or shape the upcoming campaign. So in no way do I want to diminish the importance of the events yesterday. And I'm sure it will raise interest in the convention and in President Trump's speech on Thursday night. But dramatically changing the whole course of the campaign, I think, is less likely.
That's a fascinating and extraordinarily, to me, understated answer. I mean, what we saw yesterday was seen around the world by many hundreds of millions of people. We didn't have social media when we had the attack on Ronald Reagan or Gerald Ford or other comparable attacks. And yet you still say it may be a passing phenomenon. It would have enormous emotional impact.
The emotional impact is very large. It will certainly mobilize Trump supporters. It may make some folks who are less committed think again about this race. But does it change who's more able to handle the economy, or whose position on abortion do I favor? I think those things, which are very important for determining the election outcome, still stay with us.
Okay, and how much is yet then to be determined? After Joe Biden's disastrous performance in that general election debate, people thought, what a calamity for Joe Biden. We thought that was the end of the line. And then the polls moved, but they didn't move very dramatically. Does that just tell us that opinion in this country is now so deeply entrenched that almost nothing's going to move it?
We are so entrenched that it doesn't move very much. A 2 or 3 point move in the polls right now does shift the election decidedly in Trump's favor. So it's not a big move, but it is all in Trump's favor right now. That does aid Trump in the Electoral College going into that election night in the fall. And Biden has also, by his bad performance, made himself the center of attention in a way that Trump had pretty much been the center of attention before that. Yeah. So now we have two candidates who both have liabilities, but this plays up Biden's greatest liability, too old, perhaps too infirm. Yeah. And that has to hurt Biden going forward, because he'll be asked about that every single time. Every time he gives a extemporaneous comment, it will be scrutinized. Yeah. So that is a lasting impact, I think, of the debate. If he manages to go forward without new major stumbles, and especially if he does pretty well in the fall debate, then I think that may ameliorate some concerns. But I would also say we think everything is completely locked in. A big event like that only moves the needle a couple of points. But on the other hand, that was a big event. The assassination attempt is a big event. Yeah. Big events may yet come in the next 3.5 months.
It's another surprisingly understated answer. Now, this week we'll see the convention getting blanket coverage, among millions of people who watch conventions. Many people don't watch conventions, but the spotlight is worth something. And the focus in this convention is going to be about strongman Trump versus doddering, faltering Biden. You think that would just entrench that perception in a way which can only harm Biden throughout the term of this election?
It will certainly amplify that, and the attention that I think the convention will now get over and above what it would have gotten will further amplify that. After conventions, we almost always see a several point movement in the direction of the candidate of that convention. But we haven't seen the Democratic convention yet.
Right.
Does that also have a move back towards Biden? That we just don't know at this point. So I think it's on the normal course of events, we would expect some movement towards Trump after the convention. Couple that with the shooting, couple that with the Biden debate performance, and there's every reason to think we see movement in Trump's direction. And we have seen that 2 or maybe 3 point movement already. What happens in the next week through the convention and as we get polling after the week, you'd expect it to move a few more points in Trump's direction. But is that permanent? Is that baked in through the fall?
Yeah.
Or do we go into the Democratic convention, then the other side gets to state their case?
Yeah.
Do they do anything to bring it back some?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about normal course of events and expected outcomes. I don't know about you, I've covered quite a few elections. I've forgotten what normal is like. I find and feel it's quite impossible to predict the way this election, or politics generally, but certainly this election is going to go.
Right. Well, in that case, we shouldn't waste our time trying to predict, right?
Well, no, I'm going to do that anyway.
But I saw someone with a T-shirt the other day that said, "I want to live in precedented times again." And I resonated to that.
All right, this is a question which I know pollsters hate. Who's going to win this election?
Give me a quarter and I'll flip it for you.
You think it's as simply as a toss-up?
I think it has been quite close. I think the current movement shows that Trump has a clear, small advantage in the 6 swing states that could determine the election. But how permanent is that small advantage? Does it grow? Does it stabilize? Does it shrink? Is there anything that happens between now and the early fall, let's say early October, that might bring it back into a little more equilibrium?
Yeah.
I think right now there's this slight edge to Trump, but we've got 3.5 months to go and things happen.
Yeah, look, we're familiar in the United Kingdom with the concept of battleground constituencies, and obviously it's the same in electorates all over the country. Just spell out for us, if you can, the importance of the swing states, the half a dozen or so swing states that are going to decide an election here.
Well, we vote by the Electoral College. Each state has a certain number of Electoral College votes, and they vote according to the majority in that state. In 2016 and in 2020, those elections were decided by just a handful of 3 to 6 states. And then there were 6 states that switched from Trump to Biden from 2016 to 2020, and did so narrowly that 40,000 votes in the right states would have reelected Donald Trump.
40,000 across the entire union.
Across the whole union, but distributed in those 3 key swing states. So we look at 6 states primarily that were decided by less than 1.5%. Those 6, Biden won. There's one more decided by a small margin for Trump. Which of those swing states stay with Biden, which flip back to Trump? Georgia and Arizona and Nevada, the Sun Belt states down south, are the 3 that voted for Biden but are now giving Trump the largest polling lead of these 6 states. The Midwest states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin have narrower margins but small Trump leads there as well. If Trump were to sweep all 6 of these battleground states, then that's all there is to it. Trump will win the Electoral College. Can Biden do anything to make the Midwest states competitive and potentially win them? If he could, then he could eke out a 270 to 268 Electoral College victory. But that's assuming no other state changes. So this is why prediction is hard. But the swing states really have been the states that have put either candidate above the Electoral College majority in both 2016 and 2020.
Right, so it could be a late night, and to say nothing of legal challenges, which could go on, probably will go on, for Lord knows how long.
Late night, possibly a late weekend.
Possibly weeks and months after.
Well, not weeks and months, but a weekend or so. Many of our states are slow counting their final ballots, and so if that happens in really close states, then it takes time. Plus, of course, we had recounts in several states in 2020. That takes time.
Well, we remember the hanging chads in Florida. That went on for quite a while, didn't it?
It did. That went into December, exceptionally long. And so it really comes down to, do we have very close states? Probably we do. But is the Electoral College still in doubt even with those very close states? If so, a near tie wouldn't matter so much if one side has already won the Electoral College. But as in 2020, the Electoral College hung on some of these exceptionally close states.
Okay, it's going to be a bit of a nail biter. Last question. I know this is a very political question. It's part of the conversation surrounding the American presidential election, almost from both sides, that this election is going to determine the future identity and character, not just of the United States, but of the leadership of the free world and the global strategic balance. Is that overstating it? Do you feel that we're talking about a turning point in world history here?
I think we are looking at the potential for significant change in the role that the U.S. plays in the world. A lot of that we saw in the first Trump administration with his comments about NATO, with his reluctance in supporting Ukraine these days, and in alliances more generally all over the world, not just in Europe. We've also seen a shift within the Republican Party, not just of Trump, but of other Republican senators primarily, who have also started to take a much more neo-isolationist view of the U.S.'s role, be much more reluctant about supporting Ukraine in this point. And those shifts seem to me likely to endure beyond a Trump administration, as the Republican Party has shifted dramatically from where it was in 2012 to where it was in 2016 with Trump and through his administration, and now looking forward to the administration, if he wins, that goes in January next year. So I do think that we are seeing the most dramatic realignment of a party's international commitments and view of the world that we've seen since World War II.
Again, you choose your words carefully, and your phrases are measured. Dr. Franklin, are you frightened for the Republic?
No, I'm not going to go that far, but I think it is a dramatic change beyond what we've seen in the past. Ronald Reagan was a dramatic change in one sense of armaments and building up the military and so on, but he also ended up being the guy that negotiated with the Soviet Union on arms reductions. What we're seeing is this pulling back from the U.S. having an active role in the world. The idea, and Trump certainly articulated this, that the U.S. since 2000 has been involved in forever wars that didn't end and didn't have a conclusive goal in sight.
A much more isolationist approach, but is that going to weigh very much when it comes to counting the votes? Is that going to be a big issue?
The history of U.S. politics is foreign policy, unless it's an active war or 9/11, is not the deciding issue for most voters. I suspect that's the case this year, too.
Okay, fascinating. Good to talk to you. Thank you, Dr. Franklin.
Thank you.